Hey, this is Brian JC. Welcome back. I'm really glad you're here and feel honored and privileged that you'd stop by to visit with me again. We're going to be looking at grief support videos. I'm pretty excited about this new course because I just really believe there are a lot of people that struggle with this, especially with pressures all around them and different people saying different things, and this is what you ought to think and this is the way you ought to be grieving. So we're going to be looking at some common mistakes that many people make. And so the first one is a lot of people believe that grief and mourning are the same thing, but they really aren't. And maybe that's what you've been brought up, and maybe that's what you thought as well. But really they're two different sides of the same experience or season of grief. So what is grief? Grief is an internal feeling. It's an internal response to some kind of loss in our life. It's on the inside. So everyone grieves. There's not a human in existence that is not grieved at some time or will at some point grieve in their life. It's an inside thing. It happens within the heart. So everybody grieves. But not everybody mourns. And really that's the problem. And mourning is how we express that grief outwardly. Grief is internal, mourning is external. But if you're only grieving, it stays inside. And all you're doing is hurting. But when we begin to really mourn, we complete the process. So you've got the grieving part on the inside when we experience a loss, but then you have the mourning part on the outside, how we express that. Now, there are a lot of different ways that can be expressed. Doesn't even have to be sitting down or sitting across from someone in a conversation or talking. You can mourn in as many ways as people are different. I don't know how many songs have been written because someone had lost someone. Or maybe their loss was a marriage, or maybe their loss was a child or an animal. In all of those losses, some people use music as a way to complete the process and be able to both grieve and mourn and work through it some. Other people enjoy gardening. In fact, mourning can take place in just about any circumstance. The key is this. If you're grieving on the inside, you have to find some way to work through it and work it out. And so, whether you're doing laundry or running, that's what I did when my mom died. It was devastating. It was a very difficult time in my life. I had a lot of conflicted feelings, a lot of things between us. We had gotten settled, but there were some things that I didn't get settled. And it caused a lot of grief. And so what I would do is when I went out on my runs, I focused on that specific area that I was hurting. And as I ran, I was able to get it out. And there were times when I had to stop in tears because I was hurting and broken. But I used running as a way to focus on the pain of the grief and work it out through mourning. And over time, I began to heal. And I continue to heal. So grief and mourning are different. Both are important though. So if you're only grieving and you say, hey, I got this, I don't need help, I've got everything's under control, you probably got this all bottled up on the inside. but you're not processing it out. You're not completing the process through mourning. And so I'd encourage you, find your way, what seems right to you. It might be gardening or tending to the flowers or anything, really. It can be music, it can be art, whatever it is. It could be journaling, or it could be participating in a group somewhere where you're able to talk it through, or you have a really good friend that's non-judgmental, open-minded, and doesn't roll their eyes every time you begin to talk about your story of grief. And that helps you to process that. It helps you to work it through and find your new normal. Find your next step. So grief and mourning are not the same, but both are important. So I would encourage you this week, find your way to complete the process. If you're grieving, if you're hurting. Another real common mistake people make is closure, or this idea of closure. And it seems like a lot of people want you to get over this, especially if a little time has gone by. But I want to share with you, it's perfectly normal to not be over it. In fact, I would say that's just the wrong way of looking at grief altogether. You never get over it. You never get over a person. How can someone that, let's say, a couple have been married for 60 years, most of their life has been spent together, they've shared their hopes, their dreams, their lives together for 60 years, longer than they were apart, they were together. And in that unique relationship, she or he has just got to get over it? I think it's ridiculous. That's the wrong form of closure, if you want to call it that. It's much better to maybe look at it as working through, finding your next step, understanding how important this person was, really giving yourself time to express that grief, and then process it out through mourning. That will help the most. You don't get over someone. C.S. Lewis wrote, "To be vulnerable is what it means to love. Love anything, and your heart will certainly be wrung and most likely broken." Now, he shared that not as a warning against loving someone, but as an explanation for why it's so important to love. Because real love is about vulnerability. You can really like someone a whole lot and not pull the walls down and let them into your heart. Let them get close. It's just true that love is always risky if it's real. If you really love someone, it's always going to be a risk. Because there are just certain things that you are not going to know for certain. Those things get proven out over time. But you don't know it. Not for certain. And so it is with love. Love often, I would say always, makes us vulnerable. And so in that light, we give ourselves an opportunity to pull the walls down and draw near and let someone in. And with love, there are beautiful things, there are joyful things, there are lovely things. There are times and experiences that you have with another person that are just unbelievably wonderful. But the deal with love is there's also pain. When we allow someone to come in and we pull the walls down, we make ourselves vulnerable. Vulnerable to joy and happiness and joy, all those wonderful things, but we also make ourselves vulnerable to pain when that person isn't with us. No, we don't get over them. My mom lost my sister, her daughter, early in life. I was 5.5 years older than she was, and it's now been about 15 years since my sister passed away. I don't get over her. I continue to grieve. I don't grieve as when she first passed, but I still grieve. There's a lot of healing that's taken place. I've worked through a lot of times when I wished I would have done certain things, a lot of guilt that I laid upon myself. But that's all part of the grieving and mourning process. It happens over time, but you never completely get over it. My mom never did, right up until the time she died. It was difficult, but she healed a lot from that loss, and so will you over time, but you never completely get over it. Don't let anyone push you into that mistaken understanding. And then lastly, truth is some people believe that there's a certain time that you ought to grieve. For some people it's 6 months, and then after 6 months you just need to get over it and move on with your life. For other people it's a year to 2 years, and in that time, if you haven't gotten all this wrapped up and taken care of it, well, you're in denial, or you're depressed, or you're some other label that people like to put on you. And all of that is simply not true. Now, it is true that there is a certain time that we ought to be grieving, and that time is your time. Whatever time it takes place for you to be able to work through your grief, to get to a better place, to understand what your next steps are going to be, to understand that life does go on and that I can live again. It's your timing. Don't be pushed by other people, because believe me, everyone in the world will have their idea how you ought to be grieving and how long it should take. There was this one lady, Miss Cindy. She joined one of my groups early on, a few years back, and she was in tears when she first came in. She was in tears because her family had told her that she could not get any kind of support. She couldn't see anyone one-on-one. She couldn't go to a group. She needed to take this first year to just work through this herself. And like many people, she just listened to all those voices around her. And she was in desperate pain. She needed support. She needed other people around her that had similar experiences. People that could give her encouragement, and people that she could encourage as well, to feel a little more useful. Because oftentimes when we grieve, especially if we've had a long relationship with someone, and then that person is gone, we feel real useless. We feel invisible. We feel that our whole world has gone. Certainly not true. Your world hasn't gone, but it has been turned totally upside down. And so don't listen to all those other voices so much, but listen to your own. You are the one who sets your grieving time. Now, certainly, if many, many years have passed and you are still hurting, hopefully you've sought some help. But at least in this moment, listen to your heart. If you feel like it's time to go out and spend some time in public with other people, go for it. But if other people are pressuring you to get out and join their group or have lunch with them and you really don't feel like it, you really don't feel like you're ready, then don't be pushed. Listen to your heart and let your heart lead. It's your time that's most important, not anyone else's. Well, in the next coming days, I'm going to be putting out a few more videos. I hope this has been helpful to you. If it has, hit subscribe down at the bottom and like if you enjoyed this time together. We're going to continue with some other common mistakes in the days to come, and I hope to see you back here. It's been a great encouragement and a wonderful privilege to be with you again, and I hope I see you again. Blessings.